Hi, this is Ted Morrissey, and I'm making a video on the writer's tools, specifically the use of powerful language. In the announcement, I talk about how all writers, regardless of what genre they are focusing on or writing in, should be concerned with using powerful language. We oftentimes associate that mainly with poetry, but certainly the tools that poets use in terms of alliteration, repetition, simile, metaphor, on and on and on. Those are certainly devices that all writers can use and I think should use to make their writing more effective and even memorable. In this brief video, I want to talk specifically about symbolism, and I want to draw from our textbook, Creative Writing, Four Genres in Brief, fourth edition by David Starkey. Just so happens, though, I used as a bookmark just a minute ago my correspondence from the Illinois Shakespeare Festival. So I'll spend a minute kind of plugging that. I live close to the Illinois Shakespeare Festival here in central Illinois, which is very much a benefit of being here. It's a great festival. If you are anywhere near a Shakespeare production, I would hope that you would go see a live Shakespeare production. It's a great experience. It is much, if you've read Shakespeare and maybe struggled a little bit with the language and didn't find it super exciting reading it in class, that's okay. Go and see a live production, hopefully one with really accomplished actors, and you will be surprised at how exciting, how fun, how funny it is. All right, there's my plug for Shakespeare. All right, so let's talk about symbolism. And again, I'm drawing from our text, Creative Writing, Four Genres in Brief, by, got to get the glare off there, David Starkey. There he is. All right, and I mentioned that I think his section on images, symbols, and figurative language is particularly useful. I mentioned also that it's in the chapter 1 on writing poetry, which again, we tend to associate this kind of language use with poetry, but we don't have to be exclusive in that. I primarily write fiction. I do write some poetry. I sometimes write my fiction in the form of plays, so I have some experience with that, but mainly a novelist, a short story writer. But nevertheless, I think whether you are writing fiction, poetry, again, screenwriting, drama, creative nonfiction, all of those various forms of writing benefit from paying particular attention to our language and trying to use language that is unusual, that is memorable, and so on. And so, again, I want to talk in particular about symbolism. And I'm just going to read a little bit from Starkey's book and then expound on a little bit, and that'll be that. But this is from page 45 of that particular edition. He writes, "The images have their own weight and power, but they have even more impact when they take on the resonance of symbols. Take the image of the rose as an example. Typically, a rose stands for the fleeting nature of love and beauty. There's nothing quite as beautiful as a rose in full bloom, but that bloom doesn't last long, and the rose soon fades, its petals growing brown and discolored and dropping off one by one. Unfortunately, though, if you put a rose in your poem or story or screenplay, this once terrific symbol will be sapped by its use in countless other poems. There might still be wonderful poems about roses yet to be written, but the poets who compose those poems will need to be exceptionally skillful in avoiding the many cliches now associated with this particular symbol." And obviously, there are other symbols that are overused, and so it's not just the rose that runs that risk if we use it, right? But again, the thing I want to key on here is how using something for symbolic import can have advantages. But here's the thing I really like about what Starkey says: we can definitely go too far. A little bit later, he writes, if some symbols shout out their meanings, other symbols are so private that only the poet is likely to understand them. Say, for instance, that you associate telephone poles not with communication or height or disruption of the natural world, but with the first thing you saw when you heard the news that your grandfather had passed away. If you place a telephone pole in your poem alone and without any explanation, your readers will have no idea what associations the extremely personal symbol is supposed to evoke. I think this can also happen with literary allusions. There used to be, and still are, some works of literature, some songs, some historical moments that if we allude to them, most readers will probably get it. But in our modern world, we are so split up in terms of our interests because of the internet and because of streaming services and so on. We can really focus on very narrowly defined things that we're interested in. A particular band that we like to listen to on Spotify, which maybe only 100 other people in the entire world, listen to this particular band. There should be more, but only 100 right now, right? Or we may watch some show on Hulu or on Netflix or HBO or whatever it might be that has a lot of viewers, but it's not universal. So if you reference something that happened in that show or whatever, yes, some people might get it, but a lot of people won't. So using allusions is particularly tricky these days compared to, say, 50 years ago or what have you, when we were more sort of culturally homogenous in terms of what we were reading, what we were watching, what we were hearing on the news, and so forth, right? But then here's the part I really think is important. It says, to help students avoid both of these pitfalls, authors of creative writing books generally warn against consciously using symbols. Symbols, they say, will emerge from your writing. There's some truth to that. Too much symbolism can ruin a piece of writing. As Umberto Eco says, where everything has a second sense, everything is irredeemably flat and dull. Nevertheless, as you grow more confident in your writing, you will often have the feeling that an image works both literally and symbolically. So I think that's something we very much want to take to heart, that if we try too hard to make a symbol mean something, we can overdo that in a hurry. I think we really need to trust our readers and know that if we give them vivid imagery, they will find the symbolic meaning for themselves. For one thing, once we put it out into the world, we really don't have any control over how people interpret it anyway, right? And I know that when I was a younger writer, just kind of, cutting my teeth, so to speak, one of my problems was I tried to be too directive in terms of what readers should take from a story in terms of its meaning, in terms of what it represents symbolically. I oftentimes would tack on a final paragraph where I kind of spelled it all out in case the reader hadn't gotten it up to that point. I was going to kind of hit them between the eyes with the meaning I thought they should be getting out of the story. And when I learned that isn't something I should be doing, that I don't need that final paragraph. I don't need to be too explicit, too directive, too dictatorial about what I want a reader to get out of the story. If I just write an interesting story with interesting language and give it to the reader, they will do the work of making meaning and figuring out what are symbols and what they mean to the individual reader and so on. So yes, sometimes writers do try to give some symbolic import to something or try to present an image or an event or whatever it might be that has some symbolic resonance. But I think most of the time we're better off just trying to create really vivid language, really memorable images, and then the reader will interpret those and come up with the meaning with what the symbolic import of those images and events are. All right, so I'm going to leave it at that. So I don't want to make this video too long, but hopefully we can have some discussions about this as we go further in the course.